Welcome to the guide on how to paint this miniature professionally. Although we are going to go over the steps quickly, I am going to tell you a lot of tricks that will be of great help to you. This incredible miniature belongs to the WarCrow wargame by Corvus Belli. You can find the link in the description. We start by priming the miniature in black and then in white from above. This way, the areas of maximum shadow will remain darker and ready for the next step. I like to start by giving the entire miniature a base color to see the whole. To do this, the easiest thing is to use quick gen type paints, since in a very quick and easy way, it will create the first sketch of lights and shadows. The correct way to apply these paints is with a large and soft, well-loaded brush. We have to start the brush stroke in the light area and drag towards the shadow area. As the brush is heavily loaded, the paint will act by gravity, getting into the nooks and crannies, leaving it much cleaner. If we apply these paints with a brush that is too small, or with a brush with too little load, we are going to leave patches, and in the end, it will not turn out the way we want. So keep this in mind. Well-loaded brush strokes. Once I had given the base to the miniature with the quick gen, I started painting the metal parts. For this type of parts, we are going to do something similar to the quick gen. We are going to take the brush well loaded with paint, and with one stroke, we are going to try to cover the maximum area possible. If you see that the metallic paint is too thick, you will have to add a bit of water so that it does not leave grooves. And it is also very important not to insist on the areas that are drying. It is preferable to wait and do a second pass when the first one has dried. The first part I started to highlight was the skin, and to do so, I mixed a pinkish tone with the quick gen color so that there wasn't much difference. The trick is to look for a similar color to the light generated by quick gen itself. And in this step, the most important thing is to generate texture inside of the shadow area so that it is not completely flat. For example, on the tongue, we make some lines, or in the parts that are larger, like on the weapon, we can make many dots and lines in the shadow areas and midtones. So remember, the goal of this step is for the shadow area to not be completely flat. When we already have that work created, we have to integrate it, and for this, the easiest way is to apply a wash with the first tone that we had used. If you want, so as not to completely cover up the detail that we have created in this step, we can dilute the quick gen a little. And from here on, the steps are quite repetitive. We use old rows to do exactly the same thing we did in the previous step, but reducing the size of the light a little. These steps consist of generating texture in the midtones and shadow areas, highlighting the edges to obtain a good definition, and paint the lights, especially in the parts that are more oriented upwards. But each time we lighten the color, all these steps have to be in a smaller size than the one before. And in each step, we are going to dilute that same color that we were using to a type 2 glaze, that is, with approximately 70% water, to integrate that texture and soften the transitions. We always do this with the same color that we are using, and we are going to do it in every step of the way where we lighten the color. After a couple of steps of lighting, the skin will probably look too pale. Don't worry, since we can recover the color of the shadow and the midtones by glazing. We can do it with an airbrush or brush. Or we can even do it by combining both the airbrush for the largest parts and the brush for the recesses. In this step, I use the same quick gen as the base coat, and I shot with the airbrush from below. This will enhance the color and restore the chromatic richness. And once we have recovered that color, we continue to lighten the color of the lights, and we are going to do exactly the same as we had done previously. But remember, every time we highlight, we have to reduce the size of the lights. I know you're wondering where to place the lights and shadows. We would need a specific video about that, but as a summary, the parts that are oriented towards the sky would be the light zones, the parts that are facing the front or the sides would be the mid-tone areas, and the parts that are facing the ground would be the shadow areas. However, if you want to delve deeper into this aspect of volumetry, in addition to color theory, or even how to correctly perform all the brush techniques, I recommend my Patreon, since there I have a collection of videos where I explain all this in depth. To keep the skin from being completely monochromatic, I added a little bit of turquoise to the mix. With this, I will be able to have lights with a more bluish tone in different parts of the miniature. Above all, I use this tone for the back area or those lights that were outside of the main light source. The point of this is simply so that not all the lights have exactly the same tone. And then we can continue to lighten the main color by adding more of the yellowish tone. Even if you want, you can use another tone to generate more contrast. I also applied green glazes in certain areas to break up that pinkish tone and make the skin look more natural. After this, we just continue lighting until the desired contrast is reached. And after all that process, we already have the skin ready. On the red fabric, we are going to start by darkening the areas that are not in the main light plane. Basically, the main plane of light is going to be the thigh, which is facing upwards. That is going to be the area where the color is going to be most saturated and bright. The strategy that we are going to use on the fabric is to generate more desaturated lights in all those areas that move away from the main light focus, and a more reddish and saturated light in the areas that we want to be the brightest. To desaturate a color, simply mix it with its complementary color. In this case, I have added a little turquoise to the red, and in this way that color will desaturate, that is, it will become more grayish. With this, we are going to highlight all the edges and generate texture in the midtone and shadow area, just like we did on the skin. Then with pure red, we are going to illuminate the areas that we want to be the brightest. At this point, I recommend that you intersperse the colors. That is, with this same red, you can paint within the more desaturated areas that we have previously painted. With this, we are going to make it look much more integrated. Basically, we are going to have two mixtures. The redder mixture that will be for the thigh area, and the lower part that touches the foot, and the more desaturated color for the rest of the highlights of the fabric. We are going to lighten the reddish tone with a tone that is orange and with good saturation. And the most desaturated tone, we can use a light blue or some similar tone. Otherwise, the process is the same as always. We paint the lights smaller and smaller as we lighten them. And with glaze, we are going to integrate both parts. And of course, we highlight all the edges so that they have very good definition. I recommend that in some parts of the process, you apply glazes with the color that does not correspond to that part. For example, with the color we are using to paint and illuminate the thigh, apply some glazes to the most desaturated parts. What we want is for everything to be seen as a whole, and not to see two clearly differentiated colors. The differences have to be subtle. It is normal that we lose some definition since we are applying many glazes throughout the process. If this happens, you will have to choose a color that is darker, in this case dragon blood, to shadow outline the different parts of the fabric. For the rest, it is to continue highlighting the colors as we said before and reducing the size of the light. And if we see that it is not well integrated, we dilute that same color with 70% water and apply very controlled glazes. I made the last light with sunny skin tone to get a super powerful contrast. And look how pretty the cape looks with that differentiation of tone between the desaturated parts and the brighter parts. I think the metal is the simplest part of the miniature. The first thing I did was apply a greenish quick gen to create a kind of patina that would slightly dull the effect of the metal and thus have the shine more controlled. Then I used a muted greenish tone with the metallic color of the base coat. And basically, the only thing I did was mark all the edges, mark the main light points, that is, the parts that are most oriented upwards or that are most visible in the main view, and generate a lot of texture in the mid-tone shadow areas. And once we have all that step done, we dilute that same color with 70% water and apply glazes to break the cut line between layers and make it look more blended. I mixed the metallic pigments with normal paints because this way I can control much better where the shine goes. If I did it with pure metallic pigment, it would depend on the position of the miniature with respect to the light source for that shine to be seen. But if you want to do it with pure metallic pigment, you can do it perfectly. Since I was looking for a very rusty metal, I reapplied a coat of verdigris to give it that rusty feel. So that the paint flows well and does not cover all the detail, I recommend that you apply it with approximately 50 or 60% dilution in water. From here, the process is super simple and repetitive. It is simply using the colors that we have chosen to edge, highlight, and paint the lights, but in an increasingly smaller size. We continue generating texture, but every time we lighten the color, that texture will be closer to the light area. Thus, in the shadow area, it will have a darker texture, and in the light area, it will have a lighter texture. The same thing happens with the edge highlights. Not in all steps, we are going to mark absolutely the entire edge. Each time we lighten the color, we have to select the area of maximum brightness of that edge, we expand it towards the shadow area, and when we are approaching the shadow area, we finish off with a couple of dots as a gradient. And the more we lighten the color of the edge, the smaller its highlight will be. Remember that if we lose a lot of definition in shadow, we will have to recover those edge highlights with a color that is darker. This will help us perfectly differentiate each armor plate. And to enhance the contrast, we darken the shadow area with the same color that we had applied in the first wash. These steps are usually done to restore the color and to make the miniature look more impressive. To do this, we have to shoot from below, always trying not to stain the light area. And we can enhance the mid-tones close to the light with glazes with a yellowish-greenish tone. This will make the lights look more powerful as they are surrounded by a yellowish tone. Furthermore, we are using this color in the rest of the parts of the miniature. Therefore, the lights will share this color and will make them look more impressive. For the rest, you just have to keep highlighting until you reach colors that are light enough for the metal effect to work. Remember that the last lights have to be in a super small size. The greenish tone of the armor contrasts great with the reddish tone of the clothing and the pinkish tone of the skin. Also, since we have forced the contrast a lot, this armor gives the impression that it is metallic. For the bone, we are going to follow exactly the same premise that we have done in the rest of the parts. We are going to start with a color similar to the one that the Quick Gen has left in the light. With this tone, we are going to mark all the edges to give it very good definition. Additionally, we are going to generate textures in the shadow and mid-tone areas so that they look worked and do not remain flat. And then we blended all this using glazes with that same color that we were using. If we see that we lack contrast and color, we take a color with good saturation and apply glazes, starting the brushstroke in the mid-tone area, dragging towards the shadow area. On the bone, I used a brown ink. From here, it is simply selecting which colors we are going to lighten our mixture with. In this case, I used yellowish white, that is pastel yellow, ice yellow, even sunny skin tone can work for us. But it is always recommended that we use some similar colors in all parts of the miniature so that it looks in harmony, and it is simply reducing the size of the light with each step that we highlight. We do not forget to edge highlight to obtain very good definition and also generate dots and lines within the shadow area and within the mid-tone area so that these areas look worked and don't remain absolutely flat, and so that all the lights are not exactly the same, we can generate a different tone. I'm using turquoise tones in the miniature, but you can use the ones you like the most. For the rest, we continue highlighting until you find the desired contrast. And we're simply reducing the size of the light with each step that we highlight. And if we need to continue enhancing the contrast in the shadow area, remember that we can continue enhancing with glazes or shooting from below with the airbrush. If you use a desaturated blue color, it will give a lot of definition and will also give that sinister look to the miniature. For the rest, we continue highlighting until we find the desired contrast. And when you have a good contrast, remember to apply some glazes with a light yellowish tone close to the light area. This will enhance its contrast and will also integrate this with the rest of the elements since we are using it in the miniature's whole. We continue highlighting the color of the lights, and we are going to do exactly the same as we had done previously. But remember, every time we lighten, we have to reduce the size of the lights. The worms were very simple. It is simply painting them with a dark color. In this case, I used a dark blue, and then we are going to lighten them with purple tones. But instead of painting it completely, we are highlighting it with lines to generate texture, and then a line in the central area that will be the shine. From here, it is necessary to lighten that main color by reducing the size of the light. The eyes, although a little more elaborate than the worms, are also extremely simple. We have to first try to paint them with a fairly light color. It can even be white. Then, with any type of red, you have to make random lines that go from the edge to the center of the eye. The thinner they are, the more credible it will be. So that the line is thin, you have to try to exert very little pressure with the brush on the miniature. And once you have those lines created, we apply a wash with a reddish quick gen so that they integrate with the set and look much more realistic. Then we are going to apply with a fairly light tone. It can even be white, some glazes with 50 or 60% of water in the central part of the eye. The objective of this step is to leave a more or less light circle where we are going to place the iris. If we place the iris directly on the reddish area, it will not stand out enough. That's why we do this little trick. Once you have the center of the eye much lighter, there you are going to paint the iris, but leaving a little white circle around it. I painted it with turquoise, but you can really make it any color you want. The key is that in the next lighting step, you only lighten the lower part of the iris, so that it simulates that light enters the upper part of the eye and illuminates the lower part. Once you have that, you will only have to paint the pupil in black inside the iris that we have created. And with pure white, we are going to generate the sparkle that will give that touch of moisture to the eye. I recommend that this shine takes up a little bit of the iris and part of the sclera so that it integrates both parts and shows that they belong to the same set. For the most purists, you can apply glossy varnish if you want. That's a matter of taste. Notice how it is a simple process, but quite effective. The energy of the eye is even simpler. We have previously pre-illuminated the eye in white. Since the floor paint that we are going to use covers very little and needs white to make it look well saturated, we only have to cover the entire surface of the eye with the floor yellow paint. And once it has dried, we mix it 50% with ivory to paint a brighter point in the center of the eye. This will give the sensation that it is shining. And now, we would only need the base to finish the miniature. In this case, we are going to use a snow effect to create the sand. It is a very soft terrain that gives a quite beautiful appearance. We apply it with a flat brush to make it easier to place, and we simply have to cover the entire base of the miniature. Once the snow has dried, we are going to apply a base coat to the stone with soft black from the Quick Gen. And we do the same to the ground, but with wood. Remember that these paints, to look good, have to be applied with a large soft brush and well loaded. The stone is extremely easy to paint. We are going to use dark sea blue mixed with sunny skin tone. And what we are going to do is mark all the edges and generate texture in the shadow and mid-tone areas. After that, we blended the transitions with glazes as we always do. And from there, we continue highlighting by adding more sunny skin tone, reducing the size of the highlights until we reach the desired contrast. There's no more to it. And the ground is going to be even simpler than the stone because the only thing we are going to do is apply 2 liquid pigments diluted a little with its own thinner. We use 2 different browns so that this, added to the QuickGen Zone color, generates various shades and makes it look much more interesting. And when these pigments dry, look much lighter. To enhance the contrast, we apply a dry brush with a fairly dark brown that will make the inner part look lighter than the upper part, generating a very nice contrast. Finally, we place some bushes so that the base looks more elaborate. And we paint the edge in black so that it is well framed. And this is the final result. I hope you liked the process and it was of great help. Let me know in the comments if you like this format or what you think I can improve on. Having said all this, I'll stop rambling on now, and until next time.